So hello, everybody, and welcome to my session. I'm Eduardo Sebastián, and I'm a systems engineer based in Spain, in Madrid. So basically, for those of you who are not familiar with my role, I sit down with customers every day to go over their challenges, their goals, and how our Cisco technology can help them. Right? You also have my Twitter account. It's not that I'm here to get followers, but just in case you want to hang around and see what I post about technology, that'd be fine. Final thing I wanted to say, I was looking at your faces now, and none of you seem like Freddie Mercury, right? So I guess none of us are really the DevOps master, but that's totally fine because we want to learn about that today. So before that, I want to remind you, if you join the discussion in the WebEx group, you can post your questions. So just in case we have no time to discuss something in detail, you can always ask it there. It'll be open for a few days so that you can have it all there. So before I start, I wanted to make this thought, because what we see in customers and also based on the statistics that we see in the market, everybody wants to do DevOps, right? It's a buzzy word that everybody wants to actually join. But many of the people, many of the organizations are still in the process. And in fact, only around 20% of organizations, of companies, are actually there. We could say, even though it's a journey, we could consider they're already there. And most of the organizations are still in the process, right? So the first question that might come to my mind would be, okay, why is this happening? Why do we have this paradigm? So if we look at the reasons, we could argue about that, but mainly it's because of two main ones. First one is about the culture. DevOps is all about how do people in an organization think about DevOps. What's their day-to-day role? What's their attitude towards solving problems, towards automating processes, towards working with colleagues, right? That's what DevOps is all about. Second, it's all about using the right tools, right practices to make DevOps a reality. And that's as important as the culture. We could also argue about that. But the fact is, these two are extremely, extremely important. And I want to make this very clear, just to set the expectations on the talk, which is, today we're going to focus on those tools, on those practices. This session is going to be about those tools, right? It's not going to be about the culture. It's not going to be about how to implement it. It's going to be about what are all of those tools, Cisco and non-Cisco, that can help us in the process. OK? Before that, I'm coming to the main topic of my presentation. I guess most of you know Queen, right? I guess it's no secret for nobody. And I want to ask one question, which is, how many of you have watched Bohemian Rhapsody? If you can raise your hand. OK, so I see more people than what I expected. It's quite a nice movie. I'm not going to make any spoilers, don't worry. But the movie goes about how Freddie Mercury reaches out to the three main musicians of the band, because Freddie Mercury, just in case you don't know, he reached out to the band after it was actually formed. What happened is that every one of these musicians, they were extremely good at what they did. And they were so good that they didn't know how to work with each other, right? So they worked in silos. They had their work, their day-to-day duties, very constrained, and they weren't actually talking and collaborating with each other. And that was when Freddie Mercury actually came in, and maybe it's a bit arrogant, but he said, wait, guys, I think you need me to make it all a reality, right? So he put himself in the center of all the operations, of all the development of the actual band. And that's what DevOps is all about, right? It's about breaking those silos between your teams. You might have best network engineers. You might have the best developers, best security teams. But if they're not talking to each other, then it's useless, right? And at least we're very constrained on that. So that's what it's all about, right? And that's what we're going to go about today. Before that, maybe you're coming to this talk because you're like, OK, I know what DevOps is, or I kind of know what it is. And I've seen some of these tools. Maybe you've heard about Jenkins, Kubernetes, Ansible. Maybe many of you have worked with it. So there are plenty of tools. And I know some of them, but I don't really know how they all fit into the lifecycle, right? So the goal of today is going to be to walk over all of those tools and show you how they fit into the lifecycle, right? And we're going to explain what the life cycle is. We're going to go over what are the main challenges, why do we have DevOps, and then we're going to talk about all of those tools. And I want to make this clear. It's about non-DevOps and DevOps, right? And it's, sorry, non-Cisco and Cisco. Sorry about it. It's going to be all about DevOps, hopefully. So, as I said, the agenda is going to be divided on 3 main parts. First of all, it's going to be about what DevOps is, so all about DevOps, just in case you're not familiar with it. Then we're going to move on to the non-Cisco DevOps tools, so Docker, Jenkins, GitLab, those open source tools that maybe you're already using. And finally, we're going to go over the Cisco tools. So maybe that's going to be hopefully interesting for all of you. The agenda, as I said, is not going to be about how to implement it. It's not going to be about the culture. It's not going to be an advanced session on DevOps. It's going to be about those tools and how they all work together. So please feel free to leave if you're expecting something else. I won't be worried about that. Before that, I want to make a Slido poll. I don't know if you're familiar with Slido. It's quite a nice tool to ask questions and to get kind of the feedback of the people. So if you want to join, it's as easy as scanning the QR code or going to slido.com and introducing that code. And then it's going to be only one question, all right? So don't worry, it's not going to be a hard test. And I put this question because I want to know you a bit better to kind of get the message right, all right? The question is about what's your knowledge in DevOps and what's your background? What do you actually know about DevOps? And it might be the first time you hear the word. You might be a bit familiar with it, or maybe you're even the DevOps master, right? And then maybe you can teach all of us how to properly do it. So, well, people vote. I see 3 people joining. I just want to make clear that I'm going to try to make it as useful as possible to everybody, right? So it doesn't matter where you're coming from. If you're coming from a maybe networking background, developer background, security, so really doesn't matter. I'm going to try to make it as general as possible so that it's very useful for all of you. I'm going to make the answers visible. So I see that many of you, most of you, have some knowledge about it or have heard about it. And none of you, or maybe only a few, are DevOps masters. So congrats for those of you who are. For those of you who have no clue what I'm talking about, this is also your session, so don't worry. You can stay till the end, OK? And thanks a lot for voting, by the way. I'm going to close the poll now. Thank you, everybody, for voting. So just to set the expectations right, I wanted to use this graph because at least I'm an engineer, and I think most of you are as well, and we all like graphs, right? So what I did is, on the horizontal axis, I put the 3 main stages of the talk. So first of all about DevOps. Then it's going to be about the non-Cisco DevOps tools. And finally, about what we at Cisco can have for you. Right? On the y-axis, I put what I think is going to be the level of interest from your side, just so that you actually know what to expect. So first of all, if you have no clue about what DevOps is, that's good, because you're going to enjoy it till the end, and everything's going to be very interesting. If you have if you've heard of it or you have some knowledge about it, I think it's going to be maybe a bit more known for you at the beginning, but please stay till the end, because the Cisco part is going to really interest you. And finally, if you're the DevOps master, first of all, congrats. Second, please stay till the end, because maybe you haven't heard about all the innovations we've made in the space. So first of all about DevOps. If you have any questions, please stop me anytime. I was going to ask, do you have any questions? But I haven't really talked about it, so hopefully it's all clear by now. I think it's very important to look into the future. I think it's very important to come back and look at the past. So it's very important to know where we're coming from, right? We're coming from a traditional mode of operation in which we did everything more manual. We had different stages that were very predefined between themselves, and then we went in a waterfall method from one till the other, right? So it was kind of, if we go to the next point, it's very hard to come back. That was kind of the idea. While it has its advantages, it also has kind of some inconveniences. And in the modern landscape of more distributed applications, in hybrid clouds or multiple clouds, it can be very hard to follow this model. And while we can actually do it, it might bring us some disadvantages. It's less centered on the actual user experience. Also, it might be a bit less customizable, because in the end, from the moment we gather all the requirements to the moment we actually deploy the application, it's passing some time, the user needs might change, and we have other kind of testing issues that might arise. On the other hand, we have the new model, right, which is the DevOps approach. DevOps, the great thing it has is that it's centered purely on the user, and it's centered on automation, right? So I'd say those are two of the most important parts of DevOps, right? And we do that, we make sure that we're close to the user by automating and also by testing, right? So automation, testing, and user-centric are the three most important parts, as well as rapid iteration, being able to deploy multiple features quickly, and being able to go over the life cycle in a faster way. So in case you're not familiar with it, the DevOps life cycle consists on multiple stages, right? And this is like a racetrack. So we need to go through the life cycle as quickly as we can. And the reason is we want to iterate fast. We want to be closer to the user. That's the end goal of DevOps, be closer to the user, right? And it really doesn't matter if you're coming from a DevOps or a developer background, security, networking. What matters is that in the end, the user is what matters, right? I always say that we're coming from Cisco, so we all like networking. And we enjoy to talk about switches, routers, APs, but if the user experience is not good, then what's the point, right? That's kind of what DevOps brings into the table. So I'm not going to explain all of them. I'm just going to focus on the ones I think are most important, or at least are important to explain now, which are, first of all, the coding and building phases. This is extremely important because how we're doing DevOps now is we're using our developers to work together to make that transparency between them and to kind of build a common repository, common place in which they can work together. So it doesn't matter where you're located or when you're working on it. What's really important is that you have the code in a centralized location and everybody can access it, right? So the code and building phases are collaborative and are made in a quicker way. Then I wanted to focus on the testing and release phases. These are very important because how we're changing the landscape is by testing and iterating and releasing quickly. And it's very important that we're able to do this because that's how we're going to go faster in the life cycle. If you look at the traditional mode of operation, what we're doing is we're kind of in the break and fix method, right? We're kind of trying to break it and then fix it. We're not testing before. So DevOps wants you to fail, but wants you to fail before it goes into production. That's one of the main differences. And finally, wanted to focus on the operation and monitoring side of it, because as I said, DevOps is all about gathering that feedback that the operations teams will give us and kind of give it as an input to the developers, to the users, back into the lifecycle. So it's very important to work together, testing fast, automate, and gather that feedback from the user. But before that, I just wanted to put this theoretical or a bit more abstract slide, because I think it's important to differentiate. Many people, when they think about DevOps, they think it's just a life cycle, or it's a diagram, or it's a pipeline. DevOps is not. DevOps is about what I was saying. It's the culture. It's the overlaying thought or mindset that we need to have in order to apply it successfully. And here you have kind of what DevOps is, which is the mix between that culture and those practices. And that's where actually we can make it all work together, right? So culture is about the continuous communication, the trust, the transparency. And those practices are all about CD, so continuous deployment, continuous integration, and continuous delivery, right? Kind of automating everything as fast as we can. And then finally, we have the DevOps lifecycle, which is a methodology to apply all of these cultures, all of those practices. So just in case you're not familiar with it, DevOps is like the higher concept, more theoretical. The DevOps lifecycle is a methodology we use to apply these cultures, these principles. And finally, before I finish this section and we get right into the matter, two things. Sometimes we hear net DevOps, DevSecOps. What's that really about and how does it relate to DevOps? So basically, net DevOps, and this is maybe a bit generic, but just to get ourselves into the picture, is changing our developers team or teams by our network operations team or our network people, right? So it's changing that and applying those cultures to networking principles. And of course, we could dive deeper into this, but it's all about applying this philosophy, these practices, and these methodologies to our networking principles, right? So instead of maybe talking about code, we're talking about, or about functions, we're talking about VLANs. Or instead of talking about variables, we're talking about SSIDs, right? So it's kind of applying those philosophies to the network. And then we have the DevSecOps approach, which is kind of the same. So using those DevOps practices, DevOps cultures, DevOps principles to security, to the security teams. So not only the operations teams, which we might traditionally know about, but it's more about applying those principles to every layer of the life cycle, and most importantly, what we call shift security left. I don't know if you're aware of this term, but you're going to hear it more and more during the following months, years, because in the end, shift and security left, what it means is going, let's say, in the opposite direction in the life cycle. It's all about trying to get those vulnerabilities, those errors, those attacks that we might be suffering earlier into the life cycle. So let's say I have a developer who's using an API that is malicious or that is not being documented, and we don't want the developer to use that API. What are we going to use is a tool that I'm going to explain you later that will be able to detect those errors, those vulnerabilities, before they start to write the code. So we're saving time and we're saving money. All right? That's kind of what we were talking about. So that's section one. I kind of went quickly over DevOps. I just wanted to ask if you have any questions, please ask me. Don't be shy, but hopefully it's also clear for you too. If not, then let's go into the non-Cisco DevOps tools. So kind of what I was explaining before, right? I'm sure you've heard about some of these tools, maybe Ansible, Terraform, a bit more familiar to you, Kubernetes. So maybe some of these are familiar to you, but the thing is, there are plenty of them, right? And we're never going to be experts in all of them. It's impossible, right? Nobody will ever reach that level of knowledge. And then how do they fit into the lifecycle, right? So what I want to do is I want to give you some of the tools, some of the insights on how to get that right, okay? Let's get into it. So first of all, I wanted to make one or two clarifications. Number one is many of these tools, they overlap between each other. So many of the tools you'll see work in different stages of a life cycle, right? I just put some examples. This is just to give you some raw information on how we can differentiate these tools, but many of them overlap, okay? And also, second disclaimer is there are thousands of tools that do everything, like every stages of the life cycle, right? So don't be afraid if you start to learn about new tools or about new functionalities. The idea here is just to give you these examples. So first of all, in the coding and building phase, as we were saying, the developers can use different functions, different scripts, different templates, and they can do that with Git, GitLab, GitHub, Docker. So these tools, what they do is, first of all, Git is a version control system, which basically what it does is keep tracks of every change that has been made in the code or in the different parts of the code. And then we have GitHub and GitLab to kind of they're cloud-hosted platforms to host those Git repositories, right? So they are those tools that will enable our teams to keep track of what they are actually doing. Docker or GitLab, you might be a bit more familiar with it. Docker is the de facto platform to develop modern applications, containers, distributed applications, right? So basically, Docker image is a software lightweight package in which we can run our scripts and are more lightweight than virtual machines and installing going directly into the operating system. We abstract ourselves from that point of view, and then we run containers. Moving on, we have on the testing and release phase, again, Jenkins, GitLab, or even Selenium. These are tools, Jenkins and GitLab are tools that enables us to do that releasing, that automation of all of the pipelines, the CI/CD pipelines that we have in our workflow, to actually having a tested, automated way and keep track of what we are actually deploying, right? We can do it all automated. We can have people reviewing the code as we wish, depending how critical, how important the feature is, how urgent. But these tools enable us to create those workflows, right? And Selenium is a testing tool, web testing automation tool, but more focused on web browsers. But we can have here, for instance, PyATS for Cisco, for network testing, or any other kind of testing automation tools. This stage is very important because DevOps, if we didn't have the testing phase, DevOps would be completely useless because it doesn't matter to release features into production without having a feedback of how it's going to behave. Then we have the deploy phase, deployment. Here I included some of the cloud providers because they're widely used in hybrid or even cloud-native applications, AWS, Azure. They also have their own services for doing many or all of these stages of the life cycle, but they're also quite relevant in the cloud-native landscape nowadays. Also included Ansible and Terraform, which are infrastructure automation configuring tools. So basically, infrastructure as code, being able to deploy and to manage our entire infrastructure as if it was code instead of the traditional mode of operation. Then we're on the operation and monitoring side. Operation, I included these two Kubernetes orchestration platforms, so OpenShift and Kubernetes. The thing is, these two can serve similar purposes. The only difference is Kubernetes is an open source project and OpenShift is a product, right? And finally, we have monitoring tools such as Splunk, Grafana, OpenTelemetry. Splunk is a unified data platform to ingest all of the different information from different tools. While Grafana, it's basically a web application in which we can monitor everything that is happening in the code, in the network, in the application, and kind of get tools, get analytics and alerts. And finally, OpenTelemetry, which is in the end a collection of SDKs, APIs to kind of gather all that information, collect it, and also export it for future use cases. Finally, I want to make this point very clear as well, which is kind of what we were talking before, which is this is the cloud-native computing foundation landscape, CNCF landscape. I really encourage you to go over it. So this is the link. You're going to see thousands, hundreds of tools ordered by use cases. So I want to make this clear because if you're interested in one of these, then you can go straight into it and kind of look at the landscape of that specific use case that you might be looking for, right? So this can be quite useful to make yourself an idea of what's out there. In case you want to, I see many of you are writing down the link. I can send it afterwards in the chat, okay? But so far, before we enter into the last part of the presentation, more focused on Cisco tools, do you have any questions? Is there anything I can answer for you that wasn't clear? Nope? OK. So in this last part, I'm going to talk about, so we were talking every time about DevOps. Now I'm going to make kind of the differentiation between DevOps, NetDevOps, and DevSecOps, because I think it's important that depending on what your background is, how you're going to look at these tools. Okay, so which ones are you going to use? We're going to start with NetDevOps, but before that, I was going to talk about NetOps tools. Okay, this is kind of what we were talking about. So many tools that you might know some of them. So maybe ACI, Nexus Dashboard, Thousand Eyes, and how they all fit into the network. So the NetOps tools, you might be familiar with ACI. ACI is our software-defined solution for data center networks. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them. And it's a great tool to get that overlay over the underlying network in which we can apply those policies and make everything work seamlessly. We have also Nexus Dashboard. It's our day 2 operations tool in which we can get all of the telemetry, all of the alerts from the network, kind of correlated together and get proactive insights on what's going to happen and also what's happening in the network, what's the experience of every host, every user being, and having a control over what's happening in your network. We also have Nexus Cloud, which is running on Intersite. Nexus Cloud is our new SaaS platform that was announced on the previous Cisco Live in Vegas, just in case you haven't heard of it. it's a new tool, and it's not there in terms of feature parity with Nexus Dashboard, but it's getting there and will be also de facto platform for managing data center networks from the cloud, right? Which is running on Intersight, which is our also SaaS controller for the entire data center infrastructure. So not only networking, but also compute and storage. And finally, we have Thousand Eyes. Thousand Eyes, I don't know if you've heard of it. It's a great, great tool for network monitoring. I think for people who love networks, it's great. I like to call it as the Google Maps of the internet, because you can basically see every hop of the information that is flowing through from your end user working from home to the, let's say, employee in the office, or even people trying to access services in the cloud or in hybrid cloud. So you basically have a complete map of where we were usually blind before, right? So we used to not know what's happening, and you know what happens when something is not working? Blame the network, right? It's always the fault of the network people. So Thousand Eyes really helps you in that. I really encourage you to go and deep dive on this solution. It's very, very interesting, okay? Before I continue, what I want to make with this is, I'm going to go over the net DevOps tools, DevOps, and DevSecOps, and then I'm going to show you a list of all the different sessions that you can attend to in case you want to get more familiar with any of these solutions, all right? So before I was talking about NetOps tools, which is network operations tools, now I want to talk about what we were really expecting, which is net DevOps, right? In the end, this is an oversimplification of what we will actually do, but what we are doing is we're taking our infrastructure as code tools, such as Terraform and Ansible with the providers and the modules or playbooks, and we're automating all of our infrastructure. And the key thing here is that we are using those DevOps principles to the network, right? That's the key idea here. That's a key point. We're using Ansible and Terraform to automate, to test, to deploy, to release, and to monitor all of what's happening in our network, right? So it's not that what we knew before is not useful anymore. It's that we're trying to use new tools to automate what we already know. So next point, DevOps tools. DevOps, it's more focused on the developer side, as you might imagine. And here we have also different tools that are very helpful to your teams. So first of all, we have API Insights. API Insights was also released last year, and it's a great tool that will enable you to, first of all, check against some documentation guidelines that you might have, manage all of your APIs, kind of check how compliant you're being with the Open API specifications, and kind of see how all of the APIs that you're using are being secured and are being listed and managed in your infrastructure, right? Then we have Callisti. Callisti is our service mesh manager. I don't know if you've heard of it. In case you have, then I'm going to explain a bit later, but in case you haven't, I'm going to kind of go a bit back, which is in this landscape of distributed applications, we're going to a more decentralized way of developing them. There comes some challenges as well, right? And the fact that we have different microservices running in different clouds and in different locations across the world might bring some challenges like, hey, how do we observe all of these microservices? How do we secure the communication between them? And how do we manage them, right? So Callisti brings all of these, so it kind of comes to solve all of these problems, right? So it's the service mesh that actually captures the traffic between all of the different microservices and can secure those communications and show it to the DevOps or the operations teams, okay? Finally, we have AppDynamics. AppDynamics is our application performance monitoring tool, which essentially what it does is it observes what's the behavior of the application. And what that means is we can, just to give you this example, I really like this use case, which is we're able to map what's being the impact in revenue of our applications if we are a retailer, for instance, and map it back to what's the line of code that is causing the problem, or what's the API that is giving us that latency when users try to connect to the application, right? So it's giving us that monitoring of how the application is behaving. It's giving us the end user experience. So as we were saying, we may have the best network, best cloud, best latencies, best speeds, but if the user experience is not good, then it's completely useless. So before I dive into the DevSecOps tools, I want to ask if you have any questions. If not, I'll continue. This is the last part of the Cisco tools that we have out there. Okay. And be prepared because this is we have quite a lot of tools that are very, very interesting for you. So first of all, we have Panoptica. In case you haven't heard of it, I really encourage you to take a look at it into the deep dives of Cisco Live. It's very interesting. It's basically a platform in which we can manage our entire security in our application stack. So we go all the way from pre-production to the operations or to the runtime in our DevOps lifecycle. And what it does is, on the pre-production side, you will scan all that developers are using, so containers, Docker images, Lambda functions, AWS Lambda functions, so serverless computing, APIs, internal APIs, external APIs. So you will check basically all of the resources that your developers are using to check how secure they are. And this is all in the mindset, in the landscape of shifting security left, right? So we are trying to make sure that developers are using the right tools, the right APIs, the right Lambda functions to make the application work, right? So we're shifting security left. Then we have Kube Clarity, Function Clarity, and API Clarity. These three, they form part of the API Clarity open source project by Cisco. What they do is they try to, again, secure the lifecycle. Let's go by parts. Kube Clarity, as you might imagine, it's more focused on the actual infrastructure, the Kubernetes infrastructure. So basically focuses on software, bill of materials, focuses on Docker images, and in general, it focuses on how those microservices are being secured. Following that, we have Function Clarity, which, as you might imagine, is more focused on serverless functions. In case you're not aware of this, it's the way in which we can execute code as lightweight as possible in the cloud. Right now, we have support for AWS only, but Azure and Google Cloud are coming soon. And what it does is it checks the functions before they are executed in the cloud. So we check their code integrity, and then we upload it to the cloud, and we actually execute them. Right? So we're making sure that the Lambda functions or the serverless functions that we are executing are being safe. Right? They have no vulnerabilities. And finally, we have API Clarity. API Clarity focuses on runtime, and what it does is it captures the traffic that is going through all of the different microservices, so both internal and external APIs, and it monitors how they're behaving, how the APIs are deviating from the original documentation, from what they were originally programmed to do, and we're going to be able to track how the APIs are changing over time, right? Whether we have zombie or shadow APIs, so APIs that are being used but now are deprecated, and what's up with them, right? So maybe they're not secured anymore, okay? Finally, we have API Insights, which is the tool I also showed you before, which has a module focused on security. Basically, what it does is it integrates with API Clarity and to focus more on the runtime side. So as we were saying, API Insights is more focused on the pre-production stage, while API Clarity is more focused on runtime, right? So it uses a service mesh framework, as Callisti, as I was saying, to capture that traffic and analyze it. Finally, we have these two, which are titration and App Dynamics. App Dynamics, I also showed it before. I included here because App Dynamics has a module which is called Secure App. What it does is it scans all of the different lines of code, your libraries, the functions you're using, to check how secure they are. And a great example that I like to give here is the Log4j incident. I'm sure many of you had to deal with this. Actually, it was during Christmas, so not a good time to have an attack. So with Log4j, we were able to open the App Dynamics Secure App module and tell our customers, hey, this is where you are having the problem, right? In these lines of code, you're using the Log4j, you're using these libraries that are affected by Log4j. And finally, we have titration, which traditionally is a bit more oriented towards security in the network, in the operation side, but it also forms part of the DevSecOps cycle because in the end, it'll give us that information on how all the different services are speaking to each other and how to secure them, right? So we cannot protect what we cannot see. Tetration is able to give us that. Just to wrap up, I wanted to kind of go over all of the different tools. So in the, let's say, NetOps side, we have ACI, Nexus Dashboard, Nexus Cloud, ThousandEyes, so different tools to monitor our network, but can be automated with Terraform, with Ansible. We have those modules ready for you, right? Then we have the DevOps tools, so API Insights to manage our API quality, Callisti to manage the communication between different services, and App Dynamics to monitor the experience of the users while using our application. And finally, we have our DevSecOps tools, which are trying to make that shift to shift security left, right? Trying to make security imposed earlier in the life cycle. And here we have Panoptica, which is kind of the most global solution, the most complete solution. But then we have Kube Clarity, Function Clarity, API Clarity for very specific use cases of our developers, Tetration and App Dynamics for the operation side of it, and also API Insights for our security module while monitoring our APIs. So before I go with the final 3 takeaways, I want to pause and make sure you don't have any questions. So please feel free. That's the time. It's either now or after the talk or during the discussion in the WebEx space. No questions? So before I finish, and I thank you for your time, I want to reinforce the 3 main messages that I wanted to speak about today. So first of all, DevOps is a journey. It's not something that we do once and we're already there. DevOps is a journey that we need to work on it, and we need to go over all of those cultures and practices to make it a reality. Cultures and practices, they're both equally important and they're critical to succeed. Doesn't matter if we have the right tools, if we don't have the right culture, then it's useless, and the other way around. Second, there are plenty of tools, and I saw you the CNCF landscape, thousands of tools, for monitoring, for testing, for automation. They're all very useful. But it's very, very important that we find the right use cases to actually succeed, right? To find the right tools to make it a reality. And it's very important to know that either we use less tools or hundreds of tools, it's very important that we know that our developers are actually using them right. Okay? That's our key role as DevOps masters. And finally, just wanted to make sure you know that Cisco is ready to help in all of the journeys, right? It doesn't matter if you're coming from a networking background, security, or development side, Cisco has the tools. So I really encourage you to take a look into them and dive deeper. For me, this is also the most important part of the presentation because from here, you're going to be able to go into the details of every specific tool. You can either take a picture here or I can also put it on the WebEx space, the different sessions that we have for the different tools. So in case you're like, hey, I really like your talk, but I am only interested in the application performance monitoring tool, right? So App Dynamics. Then you might need to go into these sessions to get a deep dive on what they actually are and how they actually work, right? So these are for these 4 solutions. I also included these other 4. Make sure you also take a picture if you want. These are great. Just in case you don't know it, the first number on the actual code of the session is the, let's say, the level of the session. So if it's a 1, it's introductory. If it's a 2, it's intermediate. If it's a 3, it's more advanced. So just in case you didn't know that, please make sure you attend these sessions that are for most interest to you. I'll also post these ones in the space. Final thing, please walk around the stage. It's great. I've been working on the NOC for the past days, and I can tell you lots of people have worked here, and it's really exciting to see so many customers, so many people, partners walking around. Very interesting technology, exciting announcements also coming in, so make sure you take the most out of it. And finally, and most importantly, complete your session survey if you wanna get this T-shirt. And also, if you want to rate me as a speaker, that'd be really appreciated. Okay? So if you have any questions, please come by. We'll make sure we answer them for you. But thanks so much for your time, and welcome to Cisco Live.